it was a multi-party event. I'm not sure how, but the government seems to have managed in the last 12 months to probably remove themselves from that pitch. It's been an extraordinary period, especially when you consider how much work the government did in the run-up to the elections to woo rural Britain, if you like. And I think one of the things today, which I'll be really interested to hear our amazing panel explore, is how the party can possibly take advantage of Labour's faux pas in the last 12 months. So it is, as ever, always a joy to be here, and a joy to have such a celebrated panel. Not that they need much introduction, but you know Tim Farron, you know Wendy Chamberlain, you know Dyke, and you know Alistair Carmichael, representing the breadth of rural Britain. To be honest, you know, we certainly actually know Alistair. We always get the northernmost point with him. we go in all directions, and I think that's really exciting, because this is not our work, the Countryside Alliance's work, and our representation for rural people is about all those communities, and we know that there is sometimes an assumption about rurality and the chocolate box element of that, and there's a lot that's forgotten about the challenges that rural communities face across Britain as a whole. So I'm going to ask each of the MPs on the panel to give us a brief, a few minutes on how they see the political situation in the countryside and how they think the party can appeal further to the rural voters. And then I'm going to ask you to put questions to them, because I think that's probably the most important part of today. And I will usually abuse my position as chairman to chuck your question in as well. I think, you know, we pay for lunch, so we get that. So, without further ado, can I ask Tim to start?
Yeah, sure. I'd stand up a bit first. Well, first of all, thanks for having us. We really appreciate the work the Countryside Alliance have done for years. It's been great to work in partnership with you. You are a source of great information, inspiration, and connecting parliamentarians of all different colours with rural communities. So we're grateful. I mean, the pitch is that we are to think about how we win again in rural communities. And the again is correct to focus on, given the success we had in rural communities right across the United Kingdom in the elections of last year and in the local elections of this year. It's true to say that, you know, Alistair at the top end of the United Kingdom, Andrew George right at the bottom of South West. I'm literally halfway, so I'm speaking to you from the Midlands. It's true, if you draw a straight line from the top of Alistair's patch to the Scilly Isles in Andrews, the central point is a place called Southside, 5 miles north of Kendal, so we're not the north, as Alistair reminds me. So I want to first of all talk about stuff you probably expect me to talk about. We'll talk about the issues in a minute, but let's just remember, you know, winning elections is about running campaigns and successfully delivering them. If you look around our wonderful country, urban and rural communities with identical demographics nearly have very different electoral outcomes, and it's because it's all about human beings. Where Liberal Democrats are active and working hard, we've got a chance of winning. Where we're not, we haven't. That's it. Sit down, finished. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. And one of the things I think helped us to win first in Westmorland was that the penny dropping with me and then with the rest of our team, that you can campaign as hard and deliver as many leaflets in a rural constituency as you can in an urban one. Now, it might be true that 10% of my electorate might be harder to get at, shall we say, than if you live in Hazel Grove or Harrogate or somewhere a bit more urban and concentrated. But the vast majority of people live in communities you can get at, you can deliver a leaflet every single month, and so you jolly well should. Every week during an election, every day in the last week of an election. So build your infrastructure, and that's how you win. But then more generally, I think it's important just not to patronise rural communities. You want to know about anybody, you build a relationship with them and you listen. As my grandmother used to say, Timothy, you've got 2 ears and 1 gob, use them in those proportions. So spend time amongst those people, listen to them and be on their side. And particularly, I've always found that with any community, especially farmers, but any other community, if you wander into that arena and go telling them how great the Liberal Democrats are, that's not massively impressive or effective. But you listen and find out how great they are and tell them how much they are valued and why they matter, and you share their pain and pick up their issues. They're far more likely to listen to you, and rightly so. We have 57 new MPs, but I would argue that I'm the 58th. I had a huge boundary change last time around. 20,000 people and just over half my geography is new to me. So, you know, if you're in a target seat or a widely target seat in a rural community, or indeed something for the council in a rural community, honestly, I feel your pain. But we found about the boundary change in 2021, and so for the following 3 or 4 years, I spent a heck of a lot of time in rural communities for which I was not a member of Parliament. And you turn up there, you take your A board, you do surgeries, you knock on doors, you do resident survey, you do community meetings, and you listen. You listen. The issues might be similar between the areas I currently have and the areas that I didn't then have and now have, but they're not identical. You listen and you absorb those issues and then try to do something about it. The other thing I'd say is about building relationships with opinion formers. So the Countryside Alliance, hugely significant. The CLA, the Tenant Farm Association, the National Farmers Union. It's worth bearing in mind that those groups are people full of expertise and you can learn from them. The environmental NGOs as well. It's important that we listen, we learn, and we win approval. So, for example, we're working on a food security spokesperson's paper at the moment. We hope to have released this autumn. I want the whole mass of the population of rural UK to be excited by that, but my main target, the reader I have in mind, are those groups, those opinion formers. We want those people who do form opinions with rural communities. Think it's the Lib Dems who've got it. Understand without a food security plan, we're in all sorts of danger. It's also important that we think about the issues and farming and the nomenclature and the terminology around farming can sometimes feel very, very hard to get under the skin of. But it's worth just bearing in mind and knowing that we're in a momentous period in terms of farm funding and farming in general in the UK as a whole. It's been mostly around England, and we are facing a situation where probably, well, no, for the first time since 1945, we don't have a comprehensive scheme for farmers. All farm funding in England is available on a window basis, only for a while and then gone. So they have a first come, first served approach to that, which is what the government is doing. It means that basically the little guys don't get in. And so money is increasingly just being funneled into, by accident or by design, into the hands of big landowners, some of the public sector, some of the private sector, many of them have nothing to do with farming at all. Understanding that, the consequences in our countryside, the lack of democratisation in our countryside, because it means that the smaller farmers, tenants and owner-occupiers are being sidelined as a consequence of that. Understanding that is very, very important. And then also, let's also just remember rural issues more than just farming and agriculture. Understanding about the threat of second home ownership to rural communities, the lack of public transport, affordability of housing that is in permanent usage, all those things. Distance to, so for us, rural communities, I remember when Helen's wonderful by-election campaign in North Shropshire, it's so obvious that the issues in rural communities very often about distance to travel to get to the services you need. And for her, it was ambulance times, for me, it's treatment for cancer, and there are huge, huge issues there. And then finally, Daniel Zeidler got the boot as farming minister the other week, and I've been alongside him in opposition and on the other side of the house for 2 or 3 years, and I didn't agree with him on lots of things, but I thought he was a person who sought to try and understand his brief. When we did the hustings at the NFU conference before the last general election, it was myself, it was him and Mark Spencer, then the Tory farming minister, and before we went on, there was a opinion poll briefing from Ipsos, and they showed that farmers were, at this point in February, March 2024, 51% of them were planning to vote Labour. I have not checked the polls since then. However, my sense is that 51% of farmers are not currently planning to vote Labour. They were massively disappointed by the Tories. justifiably through the trade deals, through the broken promises over Brexit, botching of the farm payment scheme. But if you add to that continued that period under Labour, and then the family farm tax outrage, all of those things added together means you've got a group of people who cheat up the Tories, voted Labour, a lot of them. Labour have over 100 rural MPs now, and now are almost instantly disappointed. So there is the threat that people will just turn to the fore, and the Liberal Democrats need to be the party that's in the room, that understands rural communities, that offers solutions for them, that is on their side, and doesn't just blow a load of hot air. So there's a great opportunity for us politically, and you build those relationships by making sure you listen to the entire those communities. And don't think rural communities are somehow special, different places where you can't campaign. No. If you want to win, you've got to knock on doors, you've got to build delivery networks, build infrastructure, raise money, and do just what you do if you were fighting in Wimbledon or Kingston or anywhere else where they have strong choices with each other. The question is, do you want to win? If you want to win, you can build an infrastructure that means that you can.
Our colleagues at the Country Land and Business Association, the CLA, did a survey of their members a couple of weeks ago, Tim, and not a single member said they were going to vote Labour, so which was, I think, a sign. But farming obviously vital. But beyond that, rural business and community life. Just before we go to Wendy, we're great friends of Hogs of Fife, great makers. If you don't know them, you should. Great makers of boots and outdoor kit, based in Cooper and Fife. They even make our branded gear. So we're great fans and a great example of a rural business. Wendy.
Thank you very much for that, and indeed I remember Hogs of Fife won the Countryside Alliance on the UK prizes a couple of years ago, and the whole team came down, and it was great. So their sales manager was determined to take as many pictures as many places in Parliament where it was not permitted. So trying to keep them on side was a little bit tricky. I feel like a slight imposter on this panel in that North East Fife is arguably, yes, it's a rural constituency, but it's a rural constituency with some built-up areas. And in fact, when I was campaigning and appealing a banking hub decision with Link, I was told that Cooper, the old borough town of North East Fife, was on ONX as an urban area. And I would certainly have disagreed with that. I also feel slightly impostery because obviously we have Tim as our excellent rural affairs spokesperson, who's obviously been in the role both as MP and rural affairs for some time, and then I have on the other side colleagues who are actually farmers. But I should say at this point that I do have an Argyllshire grandfather who was a shepherd, so I do have some of a hinterland. But I just wanted to say, I think North East Fife sort of demonstrates that there are lots of different kinds of rural, and I think one of the mistakes that potentially the current government have made at UK level is assuming that all rural communities are the same, when they are clearly not. In the same way as urban communities are the same. Birmingham is different from Manchester, is different from Newcastle, Glasgow and elsewhere. And I think that's something that, as a result, Liberal Democrats do well at, because one of the key things that we do is we understand our communities, and those local champion pieces are important. And indeed for me in North East Fife, East Nuke is different from the How of Fife, is different from T Bridgehead, but there are farmers in all of those places. And I engage on a quarterly basis with Scotland and Fife branch of the NFUS, and it usually is the same farmers who come. But I just want to call out Alistair, because he came up to the constituency a few months ago with myself and Willie Rennie, and we had a round table in St Andrews, and we had farmers there that Willie and I knew of and have spoken to briefly, but had never engaged with them sufficiently, or basically got them in a room. And I think the fact that we have a Liberal Democrat as the chair of the EFRA Select Committee, and somebody as knowledgeable and respected as Alistair, really does show how seriously the Liberal Democrats are taking rural communities and ensuring they get represented. So if I was thinking about different things that I would want to see is in relation to the UK government, I think we are all hugely disappointed. I think from a Scottish perspective it was very clear on the inheritance tax very quickly that the UK government had not properly thought through the implications for Scottish farmers, particularly tenant farmers, where tenancies can be heritable, and we kind of got a bit bluffed off. And I'm very grateful for some of the agency bodies that helped us with that and making that case. Seasonal agricultural workers continues to be a huge issue in a constituency like mine in terms of soft fruit, and I'm pleased that that's one thing the government have done, which has provided a bit of certainty. It did feel with the Conservatives that we were having ongoing conversations where they were extending the scheme a year at the time. And as I said to Mark, I remember saying to him, well, you know, how do people invest in automation or make long-term plans when they are living that kind of hand-to-mouth existence? So I do think that is something that the government have got right, but there is absolutely an ongoing issue about how can we not get people into agriculture on a long-term basis. And then, you know, the other thing I would bring, and I think that has become very obvious through the debate about inheritance tax, is the fact that people don't get involved in farming to make lots of money. And in fact, barely, for many of them, they are barely covering themselves on an annual basis. The actual annual incomes that farmers earn are pretty small. And as a result of that, I've done quite a bit of work around the transition to universal credit from working tax credits that's been causing huge issues for farmers, because the reality is that farming income is not stable in a way that the universal credit system has been designed to do. And it's been really interesting to, you know, I've had good engagement with Stephen Timms as the Minister in DWP, open to making the changes, but the minimum income floor is something that really hammers farmers, and I think it's unfortunate actually that some of the inheritance tax debate has, you know, with Jeremy Clarkson will make it look like very wealthy people that are involved in farming, but the reality is for many that is absolutely not the case. But I just wanted to very briefly in the time I have talk a little bit about the Scottish context, because obviously rural affairs are devolved to the Scottish Parliament. In some ways the Scottish context has been slightly helped by having a minister that has actually stayed in post for more than 5 minutes in my region, but she is one of those younger parliamentarians. I say younger because anybody is younger than me, who is leaving the Scottish Parliament in May, so we are losing that knowledge that she has built up in a role. But what I would say is we have seen you know, a Scottish Government not willing to work with the UK Government, very keen to ensure that they are keeping aligned with the EU, but as a result of that not embracing or taking on board some of the opportunities and getting themselves into situations such as with gene editing, where they completely resisted the changes south of the border, but now the EU are moving in the same direction, and the SNP have left Scottish farmers even further behind. But as well as that, we are seeing reductions in rural infrastructure around abattoirs, etc. Again, going back to Tim's point about getting to things, and that's before we move on to the additional costs of business. But I do think that there are hopes for the Liberal Democrats in relation to the Scottish election next year. I think absolutely Labour are no longer seen, even for that short period of time where they potentially were seen as an opportunity for rural communities, certainly moving away from that. And if we look at what is in play for the Scottish Liberal Democrats next year, there is, you know, it is not beyond the realms of possibility that 3 of the Highland seats come into play in Inverness, in Skye, Rossmacabre and Caithness, and that, you know, that old sort of Liberal tradition, those seats come back into the Liberal folk through the Scottish Parliament, as well as areas like Argyll and Bute, you know, not beyond the realms of possibility either. The challenge we have, and Tim obviously explained the campaigning element so well, is the fact that our campaigning elements for all that we're a party that are supportive of PR are very much predicated on a first-past-the-post general election system, and that is not the case in Scotland. It's an additional member system, so we are focused in the first instance on our new target seats, which I'm not surprised to know are aligned with where we made gains last year, but we are also looking at list seats and how we best campaign those big geographical areas. So that's the northeast of Scotland, then Scotland and Fife. Willie Rennie is my MSP colleague in northeast Fife, but we are hopeful that we can gain a seat on the list there, as well as the south of Scotland. So I think there are real opportunities for us in Scotland next year, and that we are very much in a way part of the narrative in a way that we haven't been before. If you are interested in Scottish politics, follow Ballot Box Scotland that is probably the most on-point political analysis of polls, etc. And they are very clearly saying that us and Reform are the two parties that look like we can make significant and good gains in the Scottish Parliament. And I think, given the fractured nature of what politics is looking like, I think as a result of that, we will have a real opportunity to make a difference. And that includes for rural communities as well. So, yeah, lots to do. If any of you are the Midlands or above, and come to Scotland and help us next year. It would be lovely to see you there. And thanks very much.
Thank you, Wendy. Sarah will give you the advantage of going ahead of Alistair, so you can take the credit for the EFRA Committee's staunch work on inheritance tax in particular. But you'll have some notes. But I'm really interested, I think, for both of you as well. I think the Alliance has raised for some time the concern that there's these three prongs to DEFRA. It's environment, obviously critically important, it's food and farming, which is critically important, but the rural affairs element is the bit that often seems to get left out, and the people part, if you like. And if you were able to touch on that at the other ones, that would be great.
Yeah, I will, definitely. Well, thank you very much to the Countryside Alliance for their support of this Fringe and for asking me to be part of it. I'm passionate about protecting rural communities and the agricultural sector. Now, I say that as somebody who is doesn't passionate on a professional sense, but as a daughter and a sister of a farmer. In fact, I grew up in North Dorset, actually, but our farm is right in the middle of Thomas Hardy's Vale of the Little Dairies, as he made so famous. Unfortunately, though, there aren't many little dairies left anymore, my family farm being one of them. We came out of producing milk about 5 or 6 years ago now, because my brother was physically and mentally exhausted after the disastrous Brexit agreement, and he just felt that he couldn't no longer milk cows. We're lucky that we own the farm, and we are able to keep beef, so he keeps beef. And he's also learned a thing or two from me, and that now he keeps a small flock of sheep. He learns everything that he knows about keeping sheep through his sister. So I'm very pleased to say that he's quite successful at it. But as we know, British farmers are the foundation of rural life in every corner of our community. And family farms really are the cornerstone to that. And some of the impacts, some of the decisions that this government have made over the course of the last year, obviously we know from last year's autumn budget, the agricultural property relief has effectively put that 20% tax on farms worth over 1 million. Now, for large corporations, that might be, they could soak it in possibly. But for small family farms, it's ruinous. It will inevitably lead to many family farms closing their gates for the very last time, because the thresholds that the governments have set are just far too low. It's insulting, and it just doesn't take any account of modern farming. And there's many examples, I think, that illustrate the impact of the human cost that this is going to cause. Not only on my own family farm, my mum is 83, she's still a partner in the business. My brother is the other partner, he's not married, and for all of us in the family, we're hoping that he doesn't get married. But that's another story altogether, the joys of family partnerships. But this, it really does, for me, it's a really good case study that actually the government had just assumed that family farms work in a specific way, and they don't. But we're in a situation now with our own family farm. My mum's 83. Every single day she wakes up saying to me and my brother, I really don't know what to do, because I have to survive another 7 years. We lost my dad 2 years ago, and she's now stressed every single day because of this government. If she doesn't survive another 7 years, the impact, the financial impact that is going to have on her and my brother and myself as a family farm, it actually physically makes me shake that I might end up having to put my mum on ice and make her sit at the kitchen table for the next 7 years. But this just isn't my family story. this is farming family stories right across the country, because we've been told as farmers, generation to generation, keep hold of the farm for as long as you can. Keep yourself part of that farming family story. Because there are generations of farmers working alongside each other. And that's why the Liberal Democrats have been constantly clear all the way through that the family farm tax has to be reversed, because our farmers need support. They deserve that support, and they shouldn't be taxed out of existence. Now I'll leave Alistair to take all the credit for EFRA. I wouldn't do that to him. But I wanted to talk a little bit about mental health on farming. It's something that I've spoken about a lot in Parliament, and I'm desperately passionate about it. I was lucky enough to go to Harper Adams Agricultural College, as it was then. Now it's Harper Adams Agricultural University, probably the best agricultural college in the country. I'm not sure if there's any other agricultural students in the room, but the sad fact of that is that one of my close friends lost his life to suicide shortly after leaving college nearly 30 years ago. He went back to the family farm, and it was under a lot of financial pressure, and he felt that it would be better if he was no longer around. And the note that his dad left was, "Dad, hopefully the money that you'll get from the insurance will keep the family farm alive." Now, I was speaking to a ambassador, Harper Adams mental health ambassador last year, and she said, she was still a student, she said there's been a student, a past student, who's lost their life to suicide every single year within the last 5 years alone. That just from one university, and going back into the farming. This is a real problem. It is going to get worse and worse and worse if we do not support our farming communities. Because thousands and thousands of farmers are really struggling. They're working long hours on their own, isolated. But they work hard because they want to put food on the tables so we can feed our families. Now, 95% of young farmers say that poor mental health is the biggest hidden problem facing the industry right now. And voices that I think that doesn't get heard enough is the struggles that women particularly face in farming. I've working alongside the University of Exeter and the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution have shown that women in farming are particularly struggling right now. Because women in farming occupy many roles, don't they? From on and off the farm, they get their hands dirty, they go out and milk the sheep, they go and get the sheep in, but they're also balancing childcare and caring responsibilities and some of the non-farming work as well. And they also, let's not forget, they also have to deal with some of the gender inequalities in agriculture, and some are victims of crime and domestic violence and rural crime alongside it. So their voices and their mental health struggles are rarely heard, and I think this is something that we must amplify as well. But the mental health crisis in farming is really painful. Nearly a quarter of the industry suffer severe anxiety. And as I've already said, they suffer with experiencing loneliness and that constant anxiety. So the government's mismanagement of the industry not only just threatens our food supply, but it's eroding the mental well-being of our farmers who work so tirelessly to sustain it. And it's clear, going back to the family farm tax, that this will only put pressure, continue to put pressure, an extra burden on an uncertainty on our farmers who are already suffering with their mental health. So it's deeply disappointing that after years and years of Conservatives taking rural communities for granted, we now see more of the same from this government. So I will continue to fight tooth and nail, not only for our farmers, but also for our rural communities, to make sure that they are able to go out and deliver the things that they love to do, but they do it knowing that they can do it feeling good about what they want to achieve. So I hope that our policies, what we will do as Liberal Democrats, now representing so many rural communities, that we will have the voice, we have the knowledge, and we have the right policies to put in place, knowing that we will stand up and protect and support and secure farming for generations to come. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much. That's incredibly powerful. And our colleagues at RABI, the Farmers Charity up in the corner there, who do incredible work in the whole area of farmers' mental health. It's, as an ex-farmer, one who went to a better agricultural college. but I can say that it doesn't exist anymore, because Y College was the premium, and RABI University was the premium agricultural college. So you can claim now that it's the best agricultural college. Anyway, sorry. Alistair.
Tim, thank you very much, and thank you for coming to conference and for supporting conference, giving us this opportunity to ventilate these issues. Tim started talking about the advances we've made and the opportunities and how cement these brilliant new colleagues in. In the last few months, actually, I've taken an effort. Wendy said I've been to North East Fife. I've also seen in their own constituencies Jamie Stone, David Chabot, Claire Young, Tesla Munn, Ed Morello, Adam Dance, Sarah Gibson, Alistair Bean, Steph Aperon, and Lee Dillon. If I didn't know better, it would sound a bit like a leadership bit. But we have got some of the most engaged and talented communicators that you could possibly ask for in rural communities in this country. And this is absolutely the time that we need them, because the level of political engagement amongst farmers is higher now by some measure than I have ever noted. Now, I think, sometimes good things happen for bad reasons, and it is the anger that has been precipitated by the changes in the budget to inheritance tax and all the other bits and pieces about fertiliser tax and double camp pickups and the rest of it, then following on the sudden closure of the SFI and the looming crisis of countryside stewardship schemes coming down the track. I find I go to a lot of, I've been to I think 10 agricultural shows this year, and the level of engagement, people sort of are coming up to me and quoting verbatim things that we have said in reports or debates or whatever. And we've got to be able somehow, and this is a challenge for the alliances, for the farming unions, for CLA, for all the political parties, to retain that level of engagement once the anger has dissipated. And I think actually one of the best ways that you can do that is by getting out and by engaging in your own communities. So, what you will find, if you go and ask your NFU for a meeting, they will be absolutely desperate to talk to you. One thing I keep telling them is what we need to do is for farmers to tell the story of farming, because so few people understand it. So few people understand the financial realities of farming. So, I don't know a single farmer who thinks that inheritance tax was not capable of improvement. This is just not the way to do it. But the main problem with the inheritance tax changes that are coming is the poor return that you get on your capital as a farmer. So if you think Orkney is principally small family units, about 250, 300 acres, maybe about 100 head of suckler beef and some sheep. That family farm, and they are all still family farms, they're still small units, with land, stock, machinery and buildings, be worth something in the region of £3 million. The inheritance tax liability, if the government get their way on that, if you take off the £1 million relief first of all, 20% of the remaining 2 million will be £400,000. Even over 10 years, you cannot expect farmers to pay that back when the net income, the net profit that they get from that £3 million asset is £25,000 to £30,000 a year. So it's obvious that the land is going to be broken up and sold, and I'll tell you this, it won't then be bought by other farmers. It will, because the real genius of what the Treasury have done here is they have somehow managed to come up with a scheme that punishes the people they say they want to penalise and penalises the people that they say they want to punish. Now, on inheritance tax, look, we've got some mileage to go here. Nothing actually changes until the finance bill. And I think that's where now all the different organisations, and I include the Alliance in this, need to be focusing their attention. We need to come up with a single offer that everybody buys into, and it might not be everything that everybody wants, but it's got to be better than what we're going to get otherwise. And we have to find the pitch to peel Labour backbenchers off, because they are the people who will make the difference here. So if you don't have the good fortune to live in a Liberal Democrat constituency, if you are in a rural seat with a Labour MP, these are the people that we need to be talking to. And I don't know what will be possible, but I do know that we have been backed into a corner, and when you've been backed into a corner, you have to fight your own way out, because doing nothing is not an option. So we're simply not going to do that. And the real frustration I have is, having taken on effectively a 5-year contract as Select Committee Chair, is there are really big strategic issues that agriculture in the countryside need to be dealing with at the moment. And EFRA as a department has been completely unable to articulate any of that big picture vision thing for farming, because they have lost the room with the inheritance tax. Steve Reid, Daniel Zeichner had their political authority stripped away from them by the Chancellor with that one move. But at the same time, actually, parenthetically, that's how you then get to the place where a dysfunctional department ends up closing something like SFI. After several iterations, finally found a scheme that worked, and then they had to close it because they ran out of money. Sheer dysfunctionality. But they lack the political authority in government and in the industry. So now we have to hope that maybe Emma Reynolds and Angela Eagle will be able to do that, but with every turn of the wheel it gets to be more and more difficult. The message to these backbench Labour MPs, incidentally, is these guys are not going to be your salvation here. If you want to get into a lifeboat, it's going to have to be one that you launch yourself. So we need to be having a medium to long-term look at what we mean by food security. As Tim has often said, we have an agricultural policy in this country now which does many worthwhile, worthy things, but actually food production is not part of it. And the hard truth that any farmer can tell you is that if you want to achieve these ends of flood management, nature restoration, climate mitigation, landscape recovery, actually the best way to do it is to use the land to produce food. But we are a million miles away from that. That's a policy that has taken us 30 years to get to this point. But if we continue on the path, then eventually we lose the critical mass of our own industry. The final thought I offer you is that the other thing we need to do is get government out of the food market, because we've had 80 years of government interference in the market now through agricultural subsidies. The net outcome of that has been to keep farmers poor and to make supermarkets rich. And actually, before we get to that point where the government can leave the stage, we need to address the various unfairnesses that are built into the different stages in the supply chain. So we need that single regulator that goes from the farm gate to the supermarket shelf, because this is a market. 15 behemoth supermarkets at the top, 210,000 primary producers at the bottom. It's ripe for abuse. It is constantly abused, and that is why we have to have a meaningful, effective regulation. Do that, and you'll find that actually that the farmers will do the rest for you.
Thank you so much, Alice. I think it's such a good point about the way that the government's approach to inheritance tax is wrong in itself, but how it has destroyed discussion of these massive strategic issues which are facing us. I'm going to ask some questions. David, if you want to, we'll try this, which will just help people. Could you tell us who you are and where you're from? I'll take 2 or 3, and then we'll share out if everyone's happy.
Just to test this.
Yes. Right. So this gentleman here, we'll start there.
So I'm Colin Hay, Gloucestershire County Council. It's a small part of farming industry as a whole, but in the 20 years since we last ran the county, the amount of county farms has diminished. Tourists have sold them off. Some counties have got rid of them altogether. And I just feel that they're so important for the rural communities and that start in farming for people that would otherwise not be able to. 2 little things. We've got 2 agricultural universities in the county, and we are also halfway between Land's End and the Scottish border. But that's an aside. It's really, and I'm struggling to know how to preserve what we've got, because clearly we're under pressure as a county council. Many of the farms can be sold for many times over for development, and it's how can I restore that kind of that resource that county farms have got, and all of them are committed to regenerative farming. They're very innovative. They are examples, but it's a real struggle to keep them.
Thank you. So the lady back there, do you need them? Or shout if you like, if you prefer. Your choice entirely.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the comments, which were really interesting. I was particularly interested to hear there's a food security paper coming up in the autumn. I wanted to, sorry, my name's Charlotte Fitzgerald. I'm from East Devon, Exmouth and Exeter East. I live in a small village, and it's right on the Otter River. We have hills all around us, and this winter we have floods every year. Every winter we had a flood, and the water was rushing through the village. There's a brook in the village. It's kept clean by the parish council, so it normally doesn't overflow. And we had parsnips floating down the brook because the topsoil on the in the field above us had been eroded by planting of maize, basically. Same thing in one of the neighbouring villages that had mud gushing through the houses at the bottom of a hill, which had been ploughed in the wrong direction. Again, maize being planted, which is destabilising the topsoil and causing runoff, and it causes a lot of damage. So I was just thinking about the points that were being made about the need to secure climate security. Food security is about climate security as well as, it's about responding to climate change as well as what's going on in the world politically. And I think these are things that really thinking about what we're planting, where moving towards more organic and regenerative farming methods, which are helping to actually stabilise the soil, is something we need now. And it's not something that we can really wait any longer for, because we're already seeing the effects in our area.
Thank you. Perhaps the gentleman at the back.
Thanks very much. I'm Henry Squidbank from Surface Against Sewage. I'm also one of your constituents, Wendy, up in St Andrews. Tim, you spoke a little bit about how you won the election in rural and coastal communities. And a huge part of that was the promise to end sewage pollution and end industrial agricultural pollution as well. So I was interested to know what the panel are intending to do in Parliament over the next kind of few years to actually deliver on those promises and show yourselves as a credible party who can campaign but also deliver.
Thank you. I think that's a good handful. So we've got tenant farms, future for tenant farms, Gloucester in particular. We've got issues around farming, water quality, both in relation to Devon and industrial agriculture and sewage issues. Who would like to fire away?
Okay, I'll have first cut then. Tenant farms, what can you do? Try and be a good landlord, and understand that, as you say, there's an appetite for regenerative farming, sustainable farming, and the rest of the nature-friendly farming, but they are trying to work in an environment where there is no certainty, and that's the biggest difficulty that they are facing. The lady from East Devon, Charlotte, was it, who said about flooding and the need for regen. Now, you're absolutely right. But if you look at what has happened this year, what's going to happen probably for the next 6 months, you have got the SFI being closed with half an hour's notice, and those farmers who were looking to get the support that they need to take the less intensive route for things like regenerative and nature-friendly farming have still got bills to pay. They've still got loans on the machinery, and they've got mortgages on the land or the rent, whatever it's going to be. So of course their response is going to be either they give up, or else they find a way to get the money that they were expecting to get from SFI. Who knows what the next iteration is going to be? And are you going to sit around and wait in the hope that the government are going to get it right next time and there will be a scheme there that you can use? Of course not. So what you've got is this madness that good practice that has been encouraged is now actually risk going backwards, because government inefficiency and dysfunctionality is forcing people to become more intensive just to keep food on the table for their families and to pay their bills. On flooding, the Environment Agency has really got a lot to answer for here as well. The fact that you've got the government agency that won't allow farmers to extract when rivers are high, put it into reservoirs which they can then use at times of drought. It just makes you wonder what on earth they think they're doing. And again, that's the good forward-thinking approach that can be encouraged and which farmers are very keen to take, but they need to be empowered to do it. On water companies, this is where Sarah and I will burnish our credentials. We produced a report from the EFRA Select Committee, which I hope got to the root of it. And essentially, the problem you have in England is that the water industry as an industry has completely lost sight of its own core purpose. The culture of that industry is rotten to the core. And we took all the 10 major water and sewage companies before the committee. We gave them all a 2-hour drilling and exposed some of the worst malpractice, and I think we've encouraged some of the small improvements that you have been seeing. We then turned our attention to Thames Water, and having done them for 2 hours, they then realised afterwards that they, and I quote the letter from the chairman, I may have misspoken. And we all know what that means. So I sent the letter right back saying, well, when you say you may have misspoken, what do you mean? Did you misspeak or did you not? And on the strength of that, we got them back for another 2 hours, so somehow or another we managed to make last for 3. So, and I think it's one of the genuine privileges that you have in a select committee like ours, is that the real frustration that people feel is that water companies in particular, but corporates in general, are just accountable to nobody. So actually, bringing them in front of a parliamentary committee, and calling them out for what they are doing is a very important part of turning that industry around. The government have got Cunliffe, we'll see what comes with that. Frankly, I'm not entirely persuaded because I don't think Cunliffe really addresses the culture issue. So as long as you allow water companies to behave like they are some sort of high-rolling hedge fund managers instead of monopoly providers of one of the most basic commodities that we need, then nothing is really going to change.
Thank you. Yeah, if I just wanted to come in on the point around flooding. I think the situation is really, really bad. I've seen potatoes kind of bobbing along down the road as a whole field of potatoes were swept out in some recent floods in Somerset, and Somerset only has one ambition in life, and that is to flood. We've had a recent announcement from the Environment Agency to say that they're no longer going to maintain some of the main rivers in Somerset, and many of you that from the West Country remember the floods of 2013-14, when then Prime Minister said money was no object. We haven't quite seen that, but we have seen the Somerset Rivers Authority that is there to help try and do some of the work. But I think if the Environment Agency is going to take funding away from maintaining the rivers, then the incentive isn't going to be there. You know, farmers don't have time necessarily to manage their riparian ownership. And you know, what I want to see is better flood management, and I think farmers can play a big role in that. And I think the way that they plant, making sure that they're responsible planting around those areas, so that we don't see parsnips and potatoes bobbing on down through our roads. But there's nature-based flood management that farmers can look at supporting, so that they reduce the flow of water down the catchment areas. But the main thing is the removal of the sustainable farming incentives, and also the cliff edge that many farmers are going to find now as we get 5,800 plus farmers coming off the countryside stewardship scheme at the end of this year, which is going to undo years and years of environmental investment, because farmers aren't going to climb right up to the hedgerows. They're not going to have the margins, because they're going to have to find a way of making their money, because they haven't got these schemes that will support them doing all of that brilliant environmental investment that they have done. So the other thing I wanted to just mention on council farms, I think the easiest answer to that is that if our local authorities were funded properly, they would be able to support our council farms, because they are so important to get people that don't have access, who don't own farms, who aren't coming from a farming background, but who want to get that first run on the ladder. So let's fund our local authorities so they can support that activity.
Just very briefly, we should meet in St Andrews, but the question I wanted to come in was just the one about council farms. Now obviously we don't have those in Scotland, but the other point that you touched on was about education and what's happened to the Scottish Rural College in my constituency, Birmingham the Countryside, I think sort of scandalous in that it was partly an Elmwood college that became part of SRUC, had a very strong balance sheet when that happened, and now pretty much is a moribund institution in the constituency. And I think what really angers me about it is one of the things we've not talked about here is more generally the cost of living and poverty. But that was an education institute that one of the important things it did was courses where not necessarily people were going to end up working in those areas, but it was young people who had been failed at school, not really had the proper support, and they had a nurturing environment that equipped them for other things. And from my perspective, from a Scottish perspective, that sort of, there's a whole piece around higher further education funding in Scotland, and further education has very, very much been the poor sibling, and as a result the outcomes have been poor, because SRUC at the same time as they were closing courses, were sending me emails saying isn't it great that we're now in award to get a degree awarding body, and I said, well, frankly I'm not interested in that, because that's not what my constituents are looking for. But how do we keep people in rural communities who don't give them the education opportunities in rural communities?
Absolutely. My son was a recent graduate of one of the agricultural universities in Gloucestershire.
Colin, county farms, too few of them, and over the last 40, 50 years they've been sold off as local authorities and just had to try and find ways of selling the families in order to keep basics going. I was on Lancashire County Council and the Labour Authority at the time, got rid of the last of the ones we had in Lancashire. I think they're really important because they are a way of ensuring that you can get new entrants into farming. I think it is important that we try and find a good use of the ones that still exist. The paper we are putting together on food security will look very much at succession and getting people in through the tenanted sector. So you can provide a kind of farm first, teach first kind of project which will allow maybe young people to go into county farms and just some of the things that go along with it, makes the county farms sustainable. But it's a reminder also that tenanted farming is crucial. And under the last government, there was the Baroness Rock Review, it was Conservative, and she put together this tenant farmers review, lots of recommendations. This government on paper has accepted them. There's no sign of the code of conduct or the new commissioner coming into place, and tenant farmers need protecting, particularly at a time of flux. Charlotte, the points you make are really, really important. I think that so soil health is crucial. As Alistair and Sarah and Wendy both touched on, the unreliability of farm funding can only incentivise one thing, and that's intensification. And so if you have got a situation where the SFI is being shut for 6 months, won't open again for 12 months, stewardship is open just occasionally for a window, grant schemes, if you're lucky, landscape recovery only if you have to be, very landed and invited into it. What are you meant to do to give roof over your head? You never will farm more and more intensively. That's why having schemes that are properly funded, that's why we support the extra billions, the environmental land management schemes that would have helped to sustain a lot of those funds and others. But it's also a reminder that a lot of it is about skills and sharing skills and how we manage soil better. And the best way to pass on skills to farmers is to do it from farmers. In which case those lessons will be learnt and listened to. The point that was made about the EA Alistair is also absolutely spot on, doing more harm than good. Finally, Henry, when all said and done, I think it's right to say that the polling showed the most popular policy of any party after election was our policy on cleaning up rivers and waterways. What have we done so far? Well, Charlie Mayer and I were on every single bill committee meeting and made 44 amendments, and the Water Act is not great, but it's better than it would have been. We're going to get the Cunliffe review. The point I made to John Cunliffe in our session with him was, look, if you leave Ofwat in either name or nature after the report, you will be seen to have failed. On paper, it looks like you've done what else to do. In the end, there's lots of things we need to do. We'll just say three briefly. First of all, we need a regulator that works. So Ofwat, the Environment Agency, they're all balkanised, they're all inadequate. They need merging to one single big regulator. We call it the Water Authority. We're waiting to see what the government will seek to do. The second thing is sort of about culture, it's about ownership. We don't favour renationalisation, not in principle, it's just if we can achieve what nationalisation would achieve by changing the ownership model through community benefit companies. So we've got the resources that are generated by the water companies and reinvested in our infrastructure. And then finally, it's about making sure we support farmers, fund them properly, so they're not in a situation where they build an alternative. To chuck everything on the land to get back to the mountain bit, just for a short period of time, somewhere else.
Thank you all for that. Sorry, I'm going to get in real trouble if we don't wrap up. I am, but I'll go to, before you, just in case, sometimes there's a little bit too much going on. I just wanted to put one very brief question to the panel, because many of us were shocked in February when the Liberal Democrats in the Welsh Assembly decided that they would prop up the Labour government budget in return for a ban on greyhound racing. Greyhound racing is it's a time activity where it has sent a real shock out across the countryside, not least in the horse racing industry, which supports tens and tens of thousands of jobs. I just would like to ensure that as far as those on this panel is concerned, that whilst we all pursue animal welfare through every possible means, that this isn't a policy which is going to be pursued by the Liberal Democrats and the rest of the country, because it is a real concern for many people and many businesses in the country.
In Wales, I know this is a big personal thing for Jean. It's something she's kind of been on for a while. To be honest, I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know anything about it at all. I'm not going to make policy up on the hoof. But if it is happening, if the ban is coming ahead in Wales, well, this might be an occasion where we watch it there.